Alright, whatever you guys say is going to be recorded now, I think. Oh, we'll see how it goes. Alright, so yeah, that's the Sioux, which is the same as the Dakota, but I know if I were, I'm Norwegian, I'm Dutch, and these things, if somebody were all of a sudden say that, well, this is the term we're going to use for Dutch, and it means it's snake in the grass. Well, I wouldn't like that very much either, so you can understand why they probably made them change that name. But I didn't like it very much. All right, next one, Monopoly. How many played the game Monopoly? What is the goal of that game? Rodney, what are you trying to do? So you roll the dice, you land on Baltic Avenue, what are you trying to do? Yeah, you want to buy everything. So you want to control all of the stuff, all the properties, all the money. And that's how Monopoly works. So let's say that Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T and Sprint and all the cell phone companies decide, you know what, we can make way more money if we just all come together and be one company. That would be awesome for the cell phone company, wouldn't it? Why would that be bad for us as consumers? Why is it good to have AT&T here and Verizon here?
Have multiple choice. If one,
So choice is one thing. What else is it going to force them to do? Compete. That's the word I'm looking for. Is they're competing. So these guys might have better coverage, but these guys might have a better price. So you as a consumer have the choice. Well, I need better coverage because I'm working all over the country. Well, I don't ever leave Watertown. I just need to make sure I can make calls in Watertown. So you have options. If there's one company, the only thing that's stopping them from charging whatever they want is you as a consumer saying, I don't want that product. How many of you think are going to get to be my age and not want a cell phone? Or probably need a cell phone? So that would be bad for us as consumers if they just said, yep, we're all going to let them go together. All right, so the next one we've got the Northwest Passage. So Christopher Columbus comes to the Americas, and what was he looking for? He slams in, or he lands here, and he starts calling everybody Indians. Where did he think he was? He thought he was in India. So he gets here thinking he's way over here, and he sees all these people. He's like, oh, look at all these Indians. That's why we still sometimes call people Native American Indians, because Christopher Columbus thought he was in India. Well, they still needed to figure out a water passage to get to India because they wanted to trade goods in India. Can you see any way, if you were to go over North America by water, could you get to the west side of North America by water? Can you see a way, if you're looking at this world map, could you get there? Yeah, you could get there. What's the problem as you go further and further north by using a water route? What do you think? Yeah, it freezes. So it would not be reliable, it would not be safe, it would not be, you couldn't use it all year long, so they said, you know what, this isn't worth it. They were hoping that Hudson, so there was a lot of exploration into here, thinking maybe one of these rivers would be able to, obviously you can see that did not work. Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a priest in Germany who didn't like the way the Catholic Church was being run. So he put his 95 complaints on a piece of paper, nailed it to a door in Wittenberg, Germany, his 95 theses, and the Catholic Church was outraged. They were so upset that they kicked him out of the church or excommunicated him from the church. Well, Martin Luther didn't stop loving Jesus Christ. He decided, well, I can't be part of the Catholic Church, so what did he do? Look at his last name. What did he create? The Lutheran faith. Exactly right. He created the Lutheran faith. So there were people that decided to leave the Catholic Church because they still believed in Jesus Christ, but they liked what Martin Luther was talking about. They liked the way he was preaching. So there was a lot of people that all of a sudden started leaving the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was, whoa, we can't have all these people leaving, so maybe we do need to make some changes. And that's where the Protestant Reformation came in, where the Catholic Church made some changes as a result of Martin Luther and his 95 Theses. All right, Christopher Columbus. Why, in 1492, did Christopher Columbus go from Spain along the coast of Africa and then head straight across to the Caribbean and then come all the way back up here to go back to Spain? Why didn't he just take a straight shot between the two places? Zach.
There's bound to be wind and disruptions that happen.
Okay, so wind, that's the reason. But why, I mean, wind can push you. Why can't he just take a straight shot between the two places? In the northern hemisphere, wind goes in a clockwise rotation like this. So he would have to go down the coast of Africa, and then in order to get back, he'd have to come back up like this because he's using a sailboat. His ship needed wind, and that's the way the trade winds blow. So if they go clockwise in the northern hemisphere, what direction do you think they go in the southern hemisphere? They go the opposite way, right? I see your fingers going, yeah, they go counterclockwise. And it has to do with the way the world is spinning, and then what happens to warm air? Does it sink or rise? It rises. So there's cold air, so there's always air coming up and down as the world is spinning underneath of it. That's what's creating that motion of clockwise and counterclockwise. That.
Almost like a tornado that will never form. It keeps on rotating, the warm air and the cold air are mixing, and whatever wants to use that power can just use it.
Yep, so if it ends up being enough of that warm and cold air colliding, that's going to get your tornadoes. And what are they called in the northern hemisphere over the ocean? What are they called? Hurricanes. It's interesting, depending upon what part of the world you're in, they might be called something different. Cyclones or typhoons. Tsunami is a huge wave, so that's that one. All right, imports, exports. Definitely a review from previous years. What is an import or an export? Do we know? Peyton, what's an import or an export? It has to do with trade. Yeah. Very good. The way I remember this is import and in. They both start with an I. So these are goods coming into our country. Can anybody give me an example of an import? Ellie. I would guess everything you're wearing has probably come from a different country. You might have a shirt that came from the United States, but your watch, I bet, came from China. Is that an Apple Watch? Those are nice. Yeah, these are all goods that are coming into our country. And our country benefits by those because we put a tariff or a tax on those items coming in. China, you want to sell stuff in our country? Fine, we're going to put a tax on it. They do the same thing to us. When we sell American goods like cars and food and stuff like that in China, they put a tariff on us as well. So it's something that all countries do. Those are imports. If we want to sell, like I said, a Ford in China, what is that called? Leaving our country, so it's an export. So I always think of an export as an exiting, EX, export. So they both start with an EX. That helps me remember what an export is. We continued on this list, lots of important things, but I want to talk next about the middle passage. So the middle passage is one of three legs of something that was called the Golden Triangle, and it's the slave trade. So the slave trade starts in Europe, and you've got these slave ships that load up with trade goods. What are trade goods? They are items that somebody in Africa would want, so that they would go and take people from probably warring tribes. They would take them. They would say, oh, the trader might say, okay, I need 100 slaves, and the chief might say, well, I want 150 guns. Okay, here are your guns. Here's tobacco, ammunition, and they would make that trade. Now the slave ship is full of slaves. They bring them across the middle passage. So this is the middle passage they're talking about. And every European country was different. The Dutch were probably the quote-unquote nicest to the slaves because they clothed them, they fed them 3 times a day, and they taught them English. Well, some people are like, geez, they sure were nice. They were doing that because they're nice, right? They weren't doing that because they were nice. If you are trying to sell a slave that is healthy, that can speak the language of the country you're going to, are they going to get more or less money for that person? They're going to get more money. So they did it because they wanted to try to make more money. The English were the worst. They would put as many people, as many slaves on that ship as they could. In fact, they would have them lay on their sides on a bunk that was about 2 or 3 feet high, and it was just on a slab of wood. So they get in these bunks, 2 or 3 bunks high. They were shackled and chained, neck, hands, feet. They were fed once a day. They were brought up on top of ship once a day, just to try to make sure that they would keep their blood flowing, that kind of stuff. If you survived that trip, it was like an act of God because it was so filthy and so horrible, and just the conditions were unbelievably terrible. So none of it was good, but I'm just saying that every country had a different level of how they brought the slaves to the Americas. Now, they weren't just brought to the United States. They were brought to the Caribbean, they were brought to South America. Which of these areas do you think most of the slaves were taken out of Africa and brought to? Do you think it was the United States, the Caribbean, or South America? Nobody wants to guess? Zach.
South America.
South America is correct. And then it was the Caribbean, and it was, I don't know if my numbers are exactly right, but I had seen it was 9 million, 3 million, and 500,000 to the United States. Now, none of it was good. I wish none of it happened, but it is part of our history, and we need to understand that it took place and that it was something that can't be erased, but it is something that we should talk about so we can understand how or even why it took place. All right, so they pick up these slaves, they bring them to the United States. Why did people want slaves? What did they do once they got here? Yes.
They made them work.
They did make them work, and they worked hard, very hard. What kind of work were they doing? Yep. There are 2 major crops. There are several crops, but the 2 major ones they brought back to Europe. Yep. Done? Nope, not wheat. Cotton was king. They called it King Cotton because that was what everybody grew. If you were going to make money, King Cotton was #1. And the other one? Tobacco. So tobacco, those are the 2 big ones. Very labor intensive, and that's why they wanted this free labor to work on these farms. So these slave ships, they would they would sell the slaves, they would pick up the cotton and tobacco and other goods, they'd bring it back to Europe, they would sell that, they'd pick up trade goods, they'd go back to Africa, and you can see why this is a golden triangle of trade because every place they stopped, they made money, they made gold. That's why it was called the golden triangle of trade. Again, horrible part of our history, but that's not like that was the first time slavery took place. You guys have seen the pyramids of Giza? Slaves built them, and that was 5,000 years ago. So pretty much as long as civilization's been around, somebody has tried to enslave somebody else, make them do work for free. Yep.
I have a different opinion to the pyramids of Giza. I think that people would just come up and help for the king, the pharaoh, because knowing that he is a higher power, they want to help.
They did have some of that going on, but for the most, they didn't have enough people that did that, so they had to make slaves do it as well. So, yep, there was some of that that took place as well. And unfortunately, we don't do world history anymore, so we can't go any deeper into that. And section 4, we got the American Revolution. We already talked about the main reason why the colonists were willing to go to war is because of Rodney. Taxation without representation. So that was the big thing. So we've got Stamp Act tax, Townsend Act tax, Intolerable Act tax. All of those things were taxes. George Washington was our first president, but why were people so willing to have him be our first president? What did he do during the American Revolution?
Led.
He was a leader, exactly. He was a general.